All right, so in this video we are going to be talking about painting the first day and the different techniques. So I need to do just a little minor adjusting here. I'm trying to make it so that we can see. I'm videotaping with my iPad as well as the Elmo. All right, so the first technique that we are going to be doing is called a layered. And we're actually just going to be doing step one of the layered one today. And it looks like you're going to see a little bit of my iPad here. That's not a big deal. Anyway, what you need for this is some watercolor paints that you are going to be sharing with one other person. You are going to need a towel for a little bit of like dabbing off your paintbrush, and you're going to need your water. So reminder when it comes to these paintbrushes that when we are using them, we are not going to be pulling and we are not going to be twisting, all right? So when you're using these, we want to make sure and keep them as wet as they need to be to get the effect. And for the layered, we're actually going to go with a pretty thick paint here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my paint or my paintbrush wet. I am going to go ahead and use yellow. My yellow is a little dirty, so probably could be a little cleaner, and if you need to clean it, the best way to do it is with your paintbrush. So I'm going to just take it out, any of the dirty stuff, and dab it on the paper towel until I get a fairly clean yellow. So we want to have what's called a layered or a loaded brush, and that means I'm going to have plenty of water to liquefy the paint and to spread it with one strip, because this is going to be layered. We're going to do 3 strips of different colors. So it is pretty dark or intense color of yellow. Then I'm going to do an intense color of red. So basically I'm doing the primaries here. So again, I'm going to clean my brush, get it wet, liquefy my paint. I don't want pink. I want a nice solid strip of red. And I think it's a little on the pink side, so I'm going to dab a little water off, get a little more paint that's not as watered down, and go over that to make a nice heavy red stripe. Okay, notice it's not real thick, neither was my yellow. They're also not perfectly straight, and that's okay. So then I'm going to wash my brush out, dab off as needed. Maybe you can't see that on the screen here, so dab off. And then I'm going to get blue, and I'm going to do my last strip in blue here for the first one called layered. So liquefy the paint, make it a loaded brush, and do a strip of blue. All right, again, that's a little on the light side. It's kind of a tint of blue, so I want a little more intensity to that. It's getting there. One more over the top, see if we can get a little darker. All right, I think we'll live with that one. All right, so that's the first one for day one. We'll come over it tomorrow. We're going to layer with a different color over the top. Okay, so the next one is called wet into wet. And wet into wet is just what it's called. It is, we're going to start with a wet paper or a wet paint, and then we're going to add some more onto it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of paint in my water filled brush here, and I'm going to get my paper wet. Now because I'm working in a small area, this square or rectangle, I'm going to keep this away from the actual pencil lines. And I also want to keep my paper fairly wet here. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep applying a little bit of water and a little bit of paint until I get where I can see the color, but it's not so dark that it's as dark as my strips. In other words, I can still see some of the paper showing through. So while this is still wet, I'm going to introduce a new color to it. So I'm going to go ahead and try a little bit of purple. So I've got wet paper with blue in it, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it. And again, I need to make sure that I add some water with my paint, and we want to have these colors blend while the paper is still wet. So you can see I can move it around and let the colors kind of bleed together. This is called wet into wet. Now, on yours, you do not have to do blue and purple, but I would be really careful staying away from complementary colors because then you're going to get a neutral or a brown. Okay, dry brush. This is the last one for day one. Dry brush is going to be a loaded brush with paint, but not so much water. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure my brush is wet. I'm going to go ahead then and get some paint in my brush. You can use whatever paint color you would like. And I'm trying to keep it just in the tip of my brush. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze off some of the water. So I'm just going to take this towel and just make sure I got all the water off. You notice I just squeezed right there gently. And then I'm going to try and spread my bristles apart. And I want to do 3 different techniques here. So I've spread the bristles apart, and I'm just going to fan it out and make something that looks like grass. Then I'm going to put my paintbrush together, and while I still have some paint, or I can get some more, let me hold that still, please. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and draw fine lines and make like a thinner grass. My third one is I'm going to stipple it. And so what I want to do here is basically just stipple on like what we would call short grass. It could also be a wood texture. Like this could be a wood texture too. So I want to do a stipple. I want to do a spread apart the bristles and do a drag. And then I'm going to put a point together and do a dry brush where I basically just kind of pull it along like that. So these are the 3 techniques. You can see what's happening here is this is starting to bleed just a little bit, or excuse me, flood just a little bit here. So I'm going to be real careful and absorb some of that. I want to stay out of the bottom portion right here because this is what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So right now, with my sketchbook gently folded, I'm going to either put this in the tub, my tub, you're going to put it in your tub, or you're going to set it below the table and let it dry while you work on your drawing. And that is it.
Oh, I see you in a class right now.
Yeah. Sorry.